What happens when a simple game changes everything? How did a kiss meant to spark jealousy end with legal papers on my doorstep, and my whole world collapsing in front of everyone I know? I thought my husband would just get mad. Instead, he turned the tables with the coldest revenge I never saw coming. The wine had been flowing freely that Saturday night, and our living room buzzed with laughter from our usual game night crowd. I watched Edric from across the coffee table, noting how he barely touched his beer, while everyone else was getting loose and silly. At 32, I felt like I was married to a man who had forgotten how to have fun. Truth or dare? Sarah giggled, pointing at me with her wineglass. The group erupted in cheers, and I felt that familiar thrill of being the center of attention. Dare, obviously, I said, tossing my hair back. Edric glanced up from his phone with that patient expression I'd grown to hate. When had my high school teacher husband become so boring? Sarah's eyes lit up mischievously. I dare you to kiss the hottest guy in the room who isn't your husband. The room went silent for a moment, then exploded with oohs and nervous laughter. I felt my heart racing, not from embarrassment but from excitement. This was exactly the kind of spontaneous moment our marriage was missing. My eyes found Theo immediately. At 30, he still had that athletic build from his days as a gym trainer, and those green eyes that always seemed to really see me. He was sitting on the floor near the couch, and when our eyes met, he gave me that crooked smile that made my stomach flip. Well, I said, standing up slowly, I guess that's pretty obvious. I walked over to Theo, very aware of everyone watching. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see Edric had put down his phone and was staring at me with an unreadable expression. You sure about this, Cory? Theo asked quietly, but his eyes were dancing with amusement. It's just a game, I said loudly enough for everyone to hear, especially Edric. I leaned down and kissed Theo, letting it linger just a second longer than necessary. His lips were warm and soft, and for that moment, I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years. The room erupted in cheers and wolf whistles. When I pulled away, Theo's hand briefly touched my arm, sending electricity through me. I turned to look at Edric, expecting jealousy, anger, some kind of passionate reaction. Instead, he was watching me with that same calm expression, but something cold had crept into his dark eyes. Fun game, he said quietly, his voice perfectly level. Oh, come on, Eddie, I said, using the nickname I knew he disliked. Don't be such a stick in the mud. It was just a silly dare. Of course it was, he replied, but I caught the way his jaw tightened slightly. The game continued, but I noticed Edric had withdrawn completely, checking his phone and barely participating. When people started talking about calling it a night around 11, I felt disappointed. I had wanted more of a reaction from him. As our friends gathered their things, Theo lingered near me in the kitchen. That was fun, he said quietly, helping me load glasses into the dishwasher. It was just a game, I repeated, but we both knew something had shifted. Right, just a game. His fingers brushed mine as he handed me a wineglass. But if you ever want to talk about anything, I'm a good listener. I felt my cheeks flush. When was the last time Edric had offered to listen to me about anything? After everyone left, Edric was unusually quiet as we cleaned up. I kept waiting for him to bring up the kiss, to show some emotion about it. You're not going to say anything? I finally asked as we turned off the lights. About what? He was checking the locks on the front door, his back to me. The dare. The kiss. He turned around, and in the dim hallway light, his expression was unreadable. What would you like me to say, Cory? I don't know. Most husbands would have some kind of reaction to watching their wife kiss another man. It was just a game, right? That's what you said. His calm was infuriating. Yes, but then there's nothing to discuss. He headed toward the stairs. I'm going to check on Nora, then go to bed. Don't forget to set the alarm. I stood there in the hallway, feeling frustrated and somehow cheated. This wasn't how I had imagined the evening ending. I had wanted passion, jealousy, some sign that he still cared enough to fight for me. Instead, I got his typical measured response to everything. But as I followed him upstairs, I noticed him pause outside our daughter's room longer than usual, and when he finally came to bed, he lay on his side facing away from me. Maybe I had gotten a reaction after all. Maybe I just needed to push a little harder next time. I fell asleep, thinking about Theo's smile and the way his hand had felt on my arm. For the first time in months, I felt like someone really saw me as desirable, as worth taking risks for. I had no idea that Edric had been watching everything much more carefully than I realized, or that my little game had started something I wouldn't be able to control. The Monday after game night, I found myself thinking about Theo more than I should have. At my desk at Premier Insurance, I caught myself replaying the kiss, the way he'd looked at me, how alive I'd felt in that moment. My phone buzzed with the text from him. "Hey, hope you survived the hangover. Want to grab coffee sometime this week?" I stared at the message, my heart racing. It was innocent enough, but something about it felt charged with possibility. "That sounds nice," I typed back. "I could use someone to talk to." "Everything okay at home?" I glanced around the office, making sure no one was watching me. "Just the usual. My husband doesn't really get me, you know. His loss. You're an amazing woman, Cory." When was the last time Edric had called me amazing? I couldn't remember. "Coffee Wednesday. There's a place near the gym where I work." "Perfect. I can always say I'm working late." The moment I sent that text, I knew I was crossing a line. But it felt good to have something exciting to look forward to. That evening, Edric seemed even more distant than usual. During dinner, he barely spoke, just listened to 9-year-old Nora chatter about her school day. "Daddy, are you sad?" Nora asked suddenly, her big brown eyes concerned. "Just tired, sweetheart," Edric said, ruffling her hair. "How about we work on that math homework after dinner?" "Can Mommy help too?" Nora asked. "Mommy has to work late this week," I said quickly. "But Daddy's really good at math." Edric's eyes met mine across the table. "Working late? That's new." "We're behind on claims processing. You know how it is at the end of the quarter." The lie came easily, which should have worried me more than it did. "Of course," he said quietly. "I'll handle bedtime then." Wednesday couldn't come fast enough. I changed clothes in the office bathroom, choosing a blue dress that I knew looked good on me. The coffee shop near Theo's gym was cozy and dimly lit, perfect for intimate conversation. Theo was already there when I arrived, and he stood up to hug me. The embrace lasted a moment longer than friendly, and I breathed in his cologne. "You look beautiful," he said, and I felt that familiar flutter of excitement. "Thank you, it's nice to hear that." We talked for 2 hours. He asked about my dreams, my frustrations, what made me happy. When was the last time anyone had asked me questions like that? "You seem like you have so much life in you," he said, leaning across the small table. "It's a shame your husband doesn't see that." "Edric's a good man," I said, but even to my own ears it sounded half-hearted. "He's just predictable, safe. Sometimes I feel like I'm suffocating." "You deserve someone who appreciates your spirit." His hand covered mine on the table. "Someone who makes you feel alive." I didn't pull my hand away. When I got home that night, Edric was in his study grading papers. I knocked on the doorframe. "How is work?" he asked without looking up. "Long, exhausting, but we're making progress on the backlog." "That's good." He made a note on a student's paper. "Nora asked for you at bedtime. I told her you'd see her in the morning." Guilt twisted in my stomach, but I pushed it away. "I'll make it up to her this weekend." "I'm sure you will." There was something in his tone that made me defensive. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing, Cory, I'm just tired." He finally looked up at me, and I was struck by how exhausted he looked. "We should probably get some sleep." Over the next few weeks, my coffee dates with Theo became a regular thing. Then coffee turned into dinner, and dinner turned into long walks where we talked about everything except the obvious attraction building between us. "I feel like I can be myself with you," I told him one evening as we sat on a bench in the park near his gym. You can be, he said, his arm around my shoulders. You're incredible, Cory. Smart, funny, beautiful. Any man would be lucky to have your attention. When he kissed me that night, it wasn't part of a game. It was real and passionate, and everything I felt was missing from my marriage. This is crazy, I whispered against his lips. The best things usually are, he murmured back. I started staying out later, creating more elaborate explanations for my absences. Over time, client dinners, office training sessions. Edric never questioned me directly, but I noticed he'd started asking specific questions. Which client? He'd ask when I mentioned a dinner meeting. The Morrison account, I'd reply smoothly. Very demanding, but worth a lot of money to the company. He'd nod and turn back to whatever he was doing, but I caught him watching me sometimes with an expression I couldn't read. One Thursday evening, I came home to find him sitting at the kitchen table with a small notebook open in front of him. What's that? I asked, hanging up my coat. Just keeping track of some things, he said, closing it quickly. How was the training session? Boring but necessary. Another lie. I'd actually spent the evening at Theo's apartment, talking and kissing and pretending I was someone else entirely. What kind of things are you keeping track of? School stuff, parent conferences, Nora's activities. Someone needs to stay organized. The implication stung. I'm organized. I just have a demanding job. I know you do. His voice was perfectly calm, but something about it made me uneasy. I'm just trying to help. That weekend, we had dinner at Edric's mother's house, like we did most Sundays. Gina Vale had never been my biggest fan, but lately, her disapproval seemed more pointed. You look tired, dear, she said to me as we sat down to eat. Edric says you've been working very late. The insurance business is demanding, I replied, forcing a smile. Of course it is, though I have to say, when Edric was growing up, I always managed to be home for family dinners. But times are different now, I suppose. Mum, Edric said quietly, but she continued. It's just that Nora mentioned you've missed bedtime stories several nights this week. Children need consistency. I felt my face flush with anger and embarrassment. I think I know what my daughter needs. Of course you do, dear. I'm just saying. Maybe we should change the subject. Tristan, Edric's younger brother, interrupted diplomatically. But the damage was done. I spent the rest of dinner feeling judged and defensive, while Edric said nothing to support me. On the drive home, I finally exploded. Are you going to let your mother talk to me like that? She's concerned about Nora. We all are. Concerned about what? I'm working hard to provide for our family. I know you are. His hands gripped the steering wheel tighter. But maybe we could find a better balance. Nora misses you. And I miss her too, but someone has to advance their career in this family. God knows you're not going to get rich teaching high school history. The words hung in the air between us like poison. Edric didn't respond, but I saw his jaw clench. I didn't mean that, I said quickly. Yes, you did. His voice was very quiet. And maybe you're right. Maybe I'm not enough for you anymore. Something in his tone made my stomach drop, but I was too proud to back down completely. I just need you to support me, I said, instead of letting your family criticize me. I'll talk to my mother, he said. But Cory, maybe you could talk to your supervisor about the overtime. This pace isn't sustainable. I agreed, knowing I had no intention of changing anything. My time with Theo was the only thing keeping me sane, the only time I felt like the woman I used to be, instead of just a wife and mother going through the motions. But as we pulled into our driveway, I noticed Edric glance at that small notebook on the dashboard, and I wondered what exactly he was keeping track of. By the following month, my relationship with Theo had evolved into something I couldn't pretend was innocent anymore. We'd moved beyond coffee and conversation into territory that made my heart race, and my conscience whisper warnings I chose to ignore. You should meet my friends, Theo suggested one evening as we sat in his car after another late work session. Marcus and Sarah would love you. They're having people over this Saturday. I can't, it's too risky. Come on, Cory. You deserve to have fun. When's the last time you went out and just enjoyed yourself? I thought about it. When was the last time? Everything in my life revolved around work, Nora's schedule, and Edric's quiet disapproval of everything I did. What would I tell Edric? Girls' night? Work event? You're creative. His hand found mine in the darkness. I want to show you off. You're too amazing to keep hidden. The idea of being someone's prize instead of someone's burden was intoxicating. That Saturday, I told Edric I was having dinner with Janet from work. Girl talk, you know. She's going through a divorce and needs support. Edric looked up from helping Nora with a puzzle. That's nice of you. What time will you be home? Not too late, maybe 10. Okay, have fun. His easy acceptance should have made me feel relieved, but instead, it irritated me. Didn't he care where I was going? Who I was with? I met Theo at the Bistro, a trendy restaurant downtown that I'd never been to with Edric. It was the kind of place with exposed brick walls and craft cocktails that cost more than our usual dinner budget. Marcus and Sarah were everything I expected from Theo's crowd. Young, attractive, successful. They welcomed me warmly, and for the first time in months, I felt like I belonged somewhere. Theo talks about you constantly, Sarah said with a knowing smile. It's so sweet. We're just friends, I said automatically, but even I could hear how unconvincing it sounded. Right, Marcus laughed. Just friends. That's what they all say. The evening flew by in a blur of wine, laughter, and the intoxicating feeling of being desired. Theo's hand rested on my lower back as we talked, and he introduced me to everyone as my friend Cory, in a way that made it clear I was special. Around 9:30, I was laughing at one of Marcus's stories when I looked up and saw a familiar figure being seated across the restaurant. Edric. My blood turned to ice. He was alone, which was strange enough, but what terrified me was the way he was looking directly at our table with an expression I'd never seen before. Excuse me, I said, standing up quickly. I need to use the restroom. But it was too late. Edric was already walking over. Hello, Cory, he said when he reached our table. His voice was perfectly polite, but there was steel underneath it. Edric, what are you doing here? My voice came out higher than normal. Having dinner. Alone. His eyes moved to Theo, then to Theo's hand, which was still resting possessively on my chair. I don't think we've been properly introduced. I'm Edric Vale, Cory's husband. The table went silent. Marcus and Sarah exchanged glances, and I wanted to disappear into the floor. Theo Marsh, Theo said, standing and extending his hand. Nice to meet you, man. Cory's told me so much about you. Has she? Edric's smile didn't reach his eyes. That's interesting, because she's never mentioned you at all. We work together, I said quickly. I mean, we're friends. Through the gym. The gym, Edric repeated. Right, the one you joined last month but never seemed to actually work out at. My face burned. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing at all. I'm just trying to understand. He pulled out his phone and showed me the screen. Because Janet called the house looking for you 20 minutes ago. Something about rescheduling your girls' night because her babysitter cancelled. The restaurant seemed to spin around me. I could feel Theo's friend staring, could see the way Theo's jaw tightened as he realized what was happening. Look, man, Theo said, his voice taking on an edge. Maybe you should have this conversation at home. Maybe, Edric agreed, but since my wife seems to prefer having her conversations here with you, I thought I'd join the party. Edric, please, I whispered. You're making a scene. Am I? I thought I was just meeting my wife's friend, the one she's been spending so much time with during all those late work sessions. Theo stepped closer to me, and I could feel the testosterone building between the two men. Maybe if you paid more attention to what an amazing woman you have, she wouldn't need to find understanding elsewhere. The words hit Edric like a physical blow. I saw him flinch, saw something break behind his eyes. You're absolutely right, he said quietly. I should have been paying more attention. To a lot of things. He looked at me one more time, and in that look I saw the end of something I hadn't realized I was destroying. Enjoy your dinner, he said. All of you. He walked away without another word, leaving me standing there with my lies exposed and my heart pounding. Jesus, Cory, Marcus said. You didn't tell us you were married. She is, but not happily, Theo said, pulling me close. Don't worry about him. Guys like that are all talk. But I was worried. There had been something in Edric's calm that was more frightening than any anger would have been. I stayed another hour, trying to salvage the evening, but my mind kept replaying the look on my husband's face. When I finally got home, the house was dark except for a light in Edric's study. I found him there, sitting at his desk with that notebook open and several papers spread out in front of him. What are you doing? I asked. He looked up at me, and his expression was eerily calm. Research. Research into what? Into my options. He closed the notebook and stood up. We need to talk, Cory, but not tonight. Tonight, I think you should sleep in the guest room. Edric, I can explain. No, he said, and there was finality in his voice that made my knees weak. You really can't. As I lay in the unfamiliar guest bed that night, I told myself that this was just a fight, that we'd work through it like we always did. Edric was reasonable, forgiving, predictable, but something about the way he'd looked at his papers, the careful way he'd said options, made me think that maybe I'd finally pushed my predictable husband too far. I fell asleep, thinking about Theo's arms around me, and woke up wondering if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. The next morning, Edric was gone before I woke up. He'd left a note saying he'd taken Nora to his mother's house and would be back that evening. No explanation, no discussion of what had happened at the restaurant. I spent the day alternating between anger and anxiety. How dare he embarrass me like that in front of Theo and his friends? But underneath the indignation was a growing fear that I'd miscalculated badly. When they returned that evening, Nora ran to hug me, but I could see confusion in her eyes. Mommy, why did Daddy sleep on the couch? She asked. Daddy had to work late in his study, I said quickly. Sometimes grown-ups do that. Grandma Gina says you work too much too, Nora said innocently. She says families should eat dinner together. I felt my face flush. What else did Grandma say? That she's worried about you and Daddy. Are you getting divorced like Tommy's parents? Of course not, sweetheart. Daddy and I just had a little disagreement. All married people do that sometimes. But even as I said it, I could see Edric in the doorway, listening. The look on his face suggested that what we'd had was much more than a little disagreement. Over the next few days, we moved around each other like polite strangers. Edric slept in his study, took care of Nora's needs, and spoke to me only when necessary. The silence was worse than any fight we'd ever had. I kept seeing Theo, telling myself that my marriage was over anyway, and I deserved some happiness. He was understanding about the restaurant incident. Guys like your husband can't handle when their women outgrow them, he said as we sat in his apartment. You're too vibrant, too alive for someone that boring. He's not boring, I said, though the defense sounded weak even to me. He's just steady. Steady is another word for dead inside, Theo replied, pulling me closer. You need someone who matches your energy. When he kissed me, I tried to lose myself in the moment, but I kept thinking about the way Edric had looked at me in the restaurant. Not angry, but disappointed. Somehow, that was worse. The following Sunday, Edric announced that we were having dinner at his mother's as usual. I don't think that's a good idea, I said. Your mother already disapproves of me. My mother loves you, he said quietly. She's just concerned about our family. Our family is fine. Is it, Cory? The question hung between us, heavy with implications neither of us was ready to address directly. We went to dinner. Gina was more pointed than usual in her comments about my work schedule and absence from family activities. Tristan tried to keep the conversation light, but the tension was obvious. You know, I said finally, setting down my fork harder than necessary. Not all of us have the luxury of being stay-at-home mothers. Some of us have to work. I work too, dear, Gina replied calmly. I just made sure my family came first. Times are different now. Women have careers, ambitions beyond just serving their families. Of course they do, but marriage is about partnership, about putting the family unit above individual desires. I felt Edric's eyes on me, and something in his gaze made my stomach clench. Sometimes individual desires matter too, I said. Sometimes people grow apart, want different things. And sometimes, Gina said quietly, people think the grass is greener somewhere else, only to discover they've burned down their own garden. The words hit too close to home. I excused myself to the bathroom and found myself crying angry tears. When I came back, I could tell they'd been talking about me. On the drive home, Edric was quiet until we were almost at our house. I know about Theo, he said simply. My heart stopped. What do you mean? I mean, I know he's not just a friend from the gym. I know about the coffee dates, the dinners, the time you've been spending at his apartment. How could you possibly know that? Because I'm not stupid, Cory, and because when someone you love starts lying to you, you notice things. He pulled into our driveway but didn't turn off the engine. I know about the fake overtime, the made-up client dinners, the training sessions that don't exist. I know Janet hasn't seen you outside of work in months. I know you've been using our joint credit card at restaurants I've never been to, at times when you said you were working. I felt like I was suffocating. Edric, I can explain. Can you? Can you explain why my wife has been lying to me for months? Can you explain why you'd rather spend time with a man who barely knows you than with your husband and daughter? It's not like that. Then what is it like? For the first time since the restaurant, there was emotion in his voice. Pain. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like my wife is having an affair and lying about it. The word affair hung in the air between us like a bomb. I'd never called it that, never let myself think of it in those terms. I'm not happy, I said finally. I haven't been happy for a long time. So you decided to find happiness with someone else instead of talking to me about it. Would you have listened, really? Or would you have just given me that calm, reasonable response you give everything? I guess we'll never know, will we? We sat in silence for a long moment. Finally, Edric turned off the car. I can't do this anymore, Cory. I can't pretend everything is fine while you live a double life. It's not fair to me, and it's not fair to Nora. What are you saying? I'm saying we need to decide what we're doing here. Are you willing to end whatever this is with Theo and work on our marriage? Or are you going to keep lying to me while you figure out what you want? The ultimatum should have been a wake-up call. I should have chosen my family, my daughter, the man who'd loved me for 10 years. Instead, I thought about Theo's hands on my face, the way he made me feel beautiful and desired and alive. I need time to think, I said. Edric nodded slowly, as if he'd expected that answer. Okay, he said. But while you're thinking, I'll be making some decisions of my own. That night, I heard him on the phone in his study, speaking in low tones. I pressed my ear to the door, but could only make out fragments. Irreconcilable differences, custody arrangement, asset division. The words should have terrified me. Instead, part of me felt relieved. If Edric filed for divorce, it would make my choice for me. I could stop feeling guilty and start fresh with someone who actually appreciated me. I fell asleep thinking that maybe this was all for the best, that maybe we'd both be happier apart. I had no idea that Edric had been documenting everything, that his quiet acceptance had been strategic rather than passive, or that the man I'd underestimated for so long was about to show me exactly how much attention he'd actually been paying. The next few weeks passed in a strange limbo. Edric continued sleeping in his study and maintaining a polite distance, while I kept up my routine of fake work sessions and real dates with Theo. But something had shifted. The thrill was losing its edge, replaced by a constant undercurrent of anxiety. At work, Janet cornered me by the coffee machine. "Hey, are you okay? You seem distracted lately." "Just tired. You know how it is with all this overtime." Janet looked confused. "What overtime? We've been slow for weeks. I've been leaving at 4:30 most days." My stomach dropped. "Oh, I meant the Morrison account. Special project." "Morrison? Didn't they drop us last month for that firm downtown?" I mumbled something about getting back to work and fled to my desk. If Janet was noticing inconsistencies, how long before others did too? That afternoon, my supervisor called me into her office. "Cory, I need to talk to you about your timesheet irregularities." My mouth went dry. "Irregularities?" "You've been claiming overtime for evenings when the building security logs show you left at normal hours, and there are several dinner expenses charged to accounts that don't exist. There must be some mistake." "I'm sure there is, but I need you to explain these discrepancies. HR is asking questions." I stammered through some excuse about clerical errors and promised to review my records. But walking back to my desk, I felt like the walls were closing in. That evening, I met Theo at our usual spot, but I was distracted and jumpy. "You're wound tight tonight," he observed, running his fingers through my hair. "What's wrong?" "Everything's falling apart. Work is asking questions about my hours. Edric knows about us, and I don't know what to do." "Hey, look at me." He tilted my chin up. "Maybe it's time to stop sneaking around. You're not happy in your marriage. You've said so yourself. Why not just end it and be with someone who actually values you?" "It's complicated. There's Nora to think about. Kids are resilient. She'll be fine. Besides, wouldn't she rather have a happy mom than parents who can barely stand each other?" His logic seemed sound, but something nagged at me. When I got home that night, I found Nora sitting on the stairs in her pajamas, tears streaming down her face. "Sweetheart, what's wrong?" "I had a bad dream," she sobbed. "I dreamed you and Daddy went away and left me alone." I pulled her into my arms, guilt crushing my chest. "That's never going to happen, baby. Mommy and Daddy will always be here for you. Promise?" "I promise." But even as I said it, I wondered if it was true. Edric appeared at the top of the stairs, and for a moment, our eyes met over our daughter's head. The pain I saw there made me look away. He came down and gently took Nora from me. "Come on, little bird, let's get you back to bed." I watched him carry her upstairs, speaking to her in soft, reassuring tones, and felt like the worst person in the world. The next day brought more bad news. My mother called, which was unusual since we typically spoke on weekends. "Cory, I just had the strangest conversation with Gina Vale." My heart sank. "What kind of conversation?" "She called to ask if I knew you were having problems at work. Apparently Edric mentioned something about HR investigating irregularities in your timesheets." "It's just a misunderstanding, Mum. Nothing serious." "Well, I hope so. But Cory, she also said some things about you spending time with another man. Please tell me that's not true." I closed my eyes. "It's complicated." "Oh, honey, no. Please tell me you're not having an affair." "I'm not happy, Mom. Edric and we've grown apart." "So you work on it. You don't run around with other men. What about Nora?" "Nora will be fine. Kids adapt. Listen to yourself. You sound just like your father did before he left us." The comparison hit like a slap. My father had abandoned us when I was 12, chasing some secretary who made him feel young again. I'd sworn I'd never put a child through what I'd experienced. "This is different," I said weakly. "Is it? Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds exactly the same." That weekend, things came to a head. Edric announced he was taking Nora to visit his brother for the day. "Why?" I asked. "Because she needs some normalcy, some time with adults who aren't constantly tense around each other." "I'm not tense. Cory, she asked me yesterday if you still loved her because you never have time for her anymore." The words were like a knife to my heart. "That's not fair." "Isn't it? When's the last time you helped with her homework, read her a bedtime story, came to one of her soccer games?" I tried to remember and couldn't. I've been busy with work. No, you've been busy with Theo. There's a difference. After they left, I sat in my empty house and really looked at my life for the first time in months. The place was a mess. Dishes in the sink, laundry piling up, Nora's school papers scattered on the counter unsigned. When had I stopped caring about any of this? I called Theo, needing reassurance. I think I'm having a breakdown, I told him. You're having a breakthrough, he corrected. You're finally seeing that your old life doesn't fit anymore. That's healthy. But what about Nora? She's suffering. She's adjusting. Look, Cory, you can't set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. Sometimes you have to be selfish to be happy. His words should have been comforting, but they left me feeling empty instead. That evening, when Edric and Nora returned, I tried to engage with my daughter, but she seemed distant. How was Uncle Tristan's? I asked. Fun. We made cookies and he taught me to play chess. She paused. He asked me if I was okay. He said I seemed sad lately. Are you sad, sweetheart? She looked at me with those big brown eyes that were so much like her father's. Are you and Daddy getting divorced? Why would you ask that? Because Tommy's parents acted like you and Daddy before they got divorced. They were polite but not happy. Out of the mouths of babes. I looked over at Edric, who was watching our conversation with an unreadable expression. Mommy and Daddy are just working through some problems, I said. Okay, Nora said, but she didn't look convinced. That night, after she was asleep, I found Edric in his study again. The notebook was open, and I could see pages of dates, times, and detailed notes. What is all that? I asked. Documentation, he said simply. Of what? Of everything. Your absences, your lies, your behavior changes, the effect it's having on Nora. You're building a case against me. I'm protecting my daughter. The possessive pronoun stung. She's my daughter too. Then start acting like it. We stared at each other across an ocean of hurt and resentment. I never meant for things to go this far, I said quietly, but they have, and now we all have to live with the consequences. What are you going to do? What I should have done weeks ago. What I should have done the first time you lied to my face about where you were going. He closed the notebook and looked at me with something that might have been pity. I'm filing for divorce, Cory, and I'm asking for primary custody of Nora. The words hit me like a physical blow. You can't do that. I can, and I will. You've made your choice. Now I'm making mine. Edric, please, we can work this out. No, we can't, because you don't want to work it out. You want to have your cake and eat it too. You want to keep your family as a safety net while you explore other options. That's not true. Isn't it? You've had weeks to choose, Cory. Every day you choose him over us. Every lie, every fake work session, every time you come home smelling like his cologne, you're choosing him. I started to cry, finally understanding the magnitude of what I'd done. I love you, I said desperately. Maybe you do, but you love yourself more, and that's not enough to build a marriage on. He stood up and walked past me toward the door. The papers will be served next week. I suggest you get a lawyer. As his footsteps faded up the stairs, I sat in his study surrounded by the evidence of my betrayal, finally understanding that my quiet, predictable husband had been planning his own game all along. And unlike mine, his had an endgame I never saw coming. The divorce papers arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a courier while I was getting ready for work. The thick envelope felt like it weighed 100 pounds in my hands. I sat at the kitchen table and read through page after page of legal language that painted me as an unfit mother, an unfaithful wife. But it wasn't the accusations that made my hands shake, it was the evidence. Edric had documented everything. Credit card statements showing dinners at restaurants during times I claimed to be working. Cell phone records showing calls and texts to Theo's number. Even photographs. Me and Theo walking hand in hand through the park, kissing in his car outside the gym. How long had he been watching? How had I not noticed? The custody petition was even worse. It detailed every missed bedtime story, every soccer game I'd skipped, every time I'd chosen Theo over family obligations. There were statements from Nora's teacher about her declining grades and behavioral changes. A report from the school counselor about her anxiety and questions about her parents' marriage. I called in sick to work and spent the day crying and calling lawyers. The first 3 I contacted said they'd review the case and get back to me. The 4th was more direct. Mrs. Vale, I have to be honest with you. Your husband has built a very strong case. The evidence of infidelity is overwhelming, and the documentation of parental neglect is concerning. I haven't neglected my daughter. According to this, you've missed 12 school events in the past 2 months, haven't helped with homework in weeks, and your daughter has told the school counselor she feels like you don't want to spend time with her anymore. Each word was like a nail in my coffin. What are my options? Limited. We can fight for joint custody, but given the evidence, I wouldn't expect more than supervised visitation initially. Supervised visitation, like I was a danger to my own child. I called Theo, desperate for comfort, but he seemed distant. This is heavy stuff, Cory. I mean, I knew you were married, but divorce and custody battles, that's a lot of drama. I thought you wanted to be with me. I do, but maybe we should cool things off until this is resolved. I don't want to make things worse for you. The cowardice in his voice was unmistakable. Now that the fantasy was becoming reality, he was backing away. So you're abandoning me too? I'm not abandoning you. I'm just saying maybe we rushed into this. Maybe you should focus on your family situation. After he hung up, I sat in my empty house and realized I'd lost everything for a man who wouldn't even stand by me when things got difficult. The next few weeks were a blur of legal meetings and failed attempts to talk to Edric. He was polite but firm. The time for discussion had passed. Nora stayed with him at his mother's house, and I was allowed supervised visits twice a week. The first one was devastating. My daughter was distant, confused, and kept asking when she could come home. This is temporary, sweetheart, I told her. Mommy's working to fix things. Did you really kiss another man like Grandma Gina said? The question came out of nowhere, delivered with the brutal honesty only children possess. Adults sometimes make mistakes, I said carefully, but you're married to Daddy. Yes, I am. Then why did you kiss someone else? I had no answer that would make sense to a 9-year-old. I had no answer that made sense to me anymore. The court date arrived faster than I'd expected. I sat in the courthouse with my lawyer, watching Edric across the aisle with his legal team. He looked calm, prepared, nothing like the man I'd dismissed as passive and predictable. When the judge called our case, the courtroom filled with evidence. Bank records, phone logs, photos, witness statements. My mother-in-law described my absences from family gatherings. Nora's teacher spoke of her slipping grades and withdrawn behavior. Then, Edric took the stand. He described my late nights, non-existent overtime, missed school events, emotional distance. When he raised concerns, I'd accused him of jealousy. The judge asked about the impact on Nora. His voice cracked. She asked if Mommy still loved her. She had nightmares. She thought she'd done something wrong. I wanted to scream that I loved her, that I never meant to hurt her, but the truth was damning. On my turn, I tried to explain marital neglect, loneliness, how the affair just happened. The judge cut through. Did you engage in an extramarital affair while lying to your husband? Yes. Did you miss family obligations to spend time with your affair partner? Yes. Did you use marital funds for those dates? Yes. The gavel fell. Custody to Edric, supervised visitation for me, equitable division of assets, adjusted for my misuse of funds. I left the courthouse with nothing. No husband, no daughter, no home. Theo ghosted me. My mother was ashamed. Friends vanished. In my tiny apartment, therapy forced the truth. I hadn't sought love. I'd sought validation, willing to burn my family for it. Supervised visits with Nora started painfully. She was cautious, but slowly trust returned. Edric was polite, distant, rebuilding their life without me. The quiet man I'd dismissed had documented everything, built an airtight case, and won, legally, methodically. A year later, Nora texted, "Ice cream after soccer tomorrow, Mum." Small steps. She was thriving. Better grades, sports, no more nightmares. I'd chased freedom from a boring marriage, only to discover that the appreciation I craved from strangers was worthless compared to the love I'd thrown away. Edric hadn't shouted or threatened. He'd watched, waited, and struck with precision. I learned too late. The most dangerous opponent is the one who stays calm, takes notes, and plays the long game. He'd won completely, and I'd lost everything that mattered.